everybody. How are you doing? Oh my God, what a time that we are living in. So much going on in every place. So much going on. Today we just had news that King Charles is going to be getting a massive 45 million pound pay rise, guys. And we are going to be diving into the backstory of how that is possible. Okay. Have you ever wondered, by any chance, how the British monarchy ever went from ruling with absolute power to being a ceremonial figurehead, or at least on paper, a ceremonial figurehead? In our latest video, we're going to be diving into the dramatic shift of power from the monarchy to parliament to uncover the juicy details behind King Charles's massive pay rise. Okay, it is a historical roller coaster, one for the ages. Like T.D. Jakes often says when he's talking to his church, there's one thing I'm not going to be able to stand, and that is Christians who don't know their Bible. So there's one thing I'm not going to be able to stand, and that is people who are Sussex friendly, who don't know their back history. It just helps us to get perspective, to be able to understand what is possible, what is tenable, in order so that we can direct our energies to the correct place. Okay, all this talking, and I haven't even said hello to anybody yet. Hello, guys. How are you doing? Welcome to Isabella Bank's YouTube channel, where we discuss all things Harry, Meghan, and their level of journey. If you're new here, I'm Wizzy, and it is great to meet you virtually. So today we're diving into how power shifted from the British monarchy to parliament. Also, we're going to be discussing why Prince William doesn't have to spill the beans about his taxes. Okay, I can see you, Lorna, already in the chat. You said, I heard about that, and I heard that Willie Leaks refused to release his expense report from the Duchy of Cornwall, and he doesn't have to, unlike his father, who released every year. We're going to be diving into that. It is really something, and it is quite interesting. But when you look at the history of it all, then you begin to understand what it's all about. And then we will reach a conclusion as to whether it makes sense for William to hide his expense report, unlike his father, who at least presented something. Whether it was accurate is a totally different thing, but at least his father was trying to do something. At least it gives the public some kind of assurance that the royal family are at least making moves to be transparent and accountable for what is seen to be public funds. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's get started. Um, our story begins in 1215 with the Magna Carta. If you ever went to school and you ever did politics and science, or political science, or government and history, you would have heard about the Magna Carta. So imagine a bunch of barons telling King John, who was the king at the time, even kings have to follow the law. Okay, this document was the start of reigning in royal power and establishing the fact that even the king wasn't or did have to obey the law, although the king is exempted from some things. And I will explain the reasons why he is exempted from some things. Okay, so as we have all heard about, the king is exempted from prosecution. All right. So the monarch is immune from prosecution and cannot be sued in his own court. The legal principle means that the king cannot be brought to court or face legal action in a personal capacity. This is a largely symbolic protection, though, because while the king is protected from prosecution, but is prosecution in his duties as king. Okay, it's similar to this new law that they have in America, where they said the president is immune from prosecution in his role as president. Okay, so this is, as I said, a largely symbolic protection because whatever the king does in his personal capacity, the Lord requires him to be held accountable for. However, there's hardly anything that the king does in his personal capacity. So, um, that's neither here nor there, but there you have it. Okay. So the other thing is that the king is exempt from paying some personal taxes. He's exempt from paying some personal taxes that ordinary citizens are required to pay. For instance, the income generated from the sovereign grant, which is derived from the crown estate profits, is not subject to income tax. Any money they get from there is not subject to income tax. However, the king will voluntarily pay tax on other sources of income, such as private estates. Anything that is outside of the crown estate, the king will tend to pay his taxes on. So these exemptions reflect the constitutional principle that the sovereign is above the law in terms of anything that connects him to the crown estate, him acting in his capacity as king. The king's actions are typically carried out on the advice of government ministers who are accountable to parliament and the public. All right. So back then, in those days, the English monarchs actually started parliament to handle taxes. Over time, parliament grew more influential, especially as they realized the need for fund was constant. What does that mean? It means that before all semblance of organized government was made public, at the beginning of governance in the UK, it all started when the king used to convene his barons, his lords, all the men with titles in the UK, and they would come to a meeting place, and basically it was to get everyone to pay taxes. That was the origin of parliament in the UK. It was the royal family that was in power. They were the ones ruling, they were the ones, and they only convened parliament in order for them to delegate the task of getting taxes from the people. That was the beginning of it. Okay. Um, let's see what that meant. Okay. So the monarchs ruled under something they called the royal prerogative. This was a set of powers that allowed them to make big decisions without needing parliament's consent. But as time went on, many of these powers shifted to government ministers. Here's a quick rundown of these prerogatives. Okay, so in those days, the king had the power to engage in foreign affairs, diplomacy, treaties, and recognizing foreign states. He had the power to declare war and peace. He had declared the power to issue and regulate passports. And then you also had the power to, the king had the power to grant pardons and reprieves. You also had the power to summon and dissolve parliament. Historically, the monarch had control over parliamentary sessions. Today, these powers are regulated by laws and conventions. The king, and it remains the case today, this is the formal approval needed for a bill to become law. It's mostly ceremonial, but still very crucial. No law in the UK can be legal unless the king has given his signature on the document, thereby making it a law. Okay? So, the king also is responsible for the appointment of ministers. Although the and that remains the case today, even though elections are done and it is whoever the people have agreed to elect who is declared the prime minister. Before the prime minister can legally take his place as the prime minister of the UK, he has to get formal appointment from the king. Okay? The king is also responsible for the honors and the title system, basically the peerage of the royal family. That was what it is, their own tradition, whether we understand it or respect it or not. This is their own tradition. The only reason why we buck against these kind of things now is because of the issues with Harry and Meghan. That's one. And also because it is vastly different from what operates in America. But the British people are not coming to, well, they did in those days want to impose their beliefs. But since you kicked them out, I don't believe that they are trying to impose their way of life on you guys anymore. It's not like I'm making a case for them, but I feel like in every place that people are, you need to leave them alone with what they are doing. And it's just like how a lot of countries had democracy actually imposed on them before they were able to actually successfully impose democracy on them. For instance, I would say like a lot of African countries were not really ready for democracy. We had our own system of governance before the British government came in and brought in um, colonization. But after colonization, they now began to impose democracy on the African countries. Remember, what's that country where Libya, where you had Mohammed uh, Gaddafi as the president of Libya. It wasn't a democratic state, but he was able to take care of his people and make sure that everybody could live well, eat well, have their own home, drive their own cars, take care of their families. And when he got the country to a position where they were able to take care of themselves and their citizens in a very progressive and productive manner, guess what? Countries swooped in and took him out. Now, Libya is in a complete mess. They can't handle the democracy. So, there is that point to be made just to say that your standard of living doesn't mean that it should be the same for the next person. It doesn't always work out that way. All right. So, um, if you're just joining and you're new here, please go ahead to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and leave a comment or two in the comment section. If you have visited before and you have not yet subscribed, let today be the day you decide to subscribe. For all those who have been rocking with me from the beginning, thank you. And don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section and also hit the like button. Okay, as we were discussing how the UK had power transferred from the royal family to parliament or the modern democracy that we are experiencing today. First of all, it started with the Magna Carta in 1215. Fast forward to 17th century, England was like a soap opera, even worse than it is today, with battles, beheadings, and even a brief period without a king. The English Civil War saw Parliament rise up against King Charles I over issues of authority, religion, and finance, leading to the Civil War. A few years later, monarchy was restored, but with the Glorious Revolution in 1688, Parliament booted out James II and brought in William III and Mary II under the condition that they'd play by Parliament rules. Okay, so this is see how from absolute power, as time went on, their power started getting limited by the very fact that, well, it first of all started with parliament that the king themselves organized, and they organized it in order to get money to rule the country from the members of the king's cabinet. turned out that starting the parliament was what actually weakened their power. And it only makes sense. If you're going to get money from people, you're going to have to give them some rights. It's sort of like they're buying their rights from you. Anyway, so it got them to a point where there was a revolution in 1688. All right. So eventually, what happened was that the parliament rules greatly limited the royal power. They did not have the same carte blanche as they had before to do whatever they wanted. My goodness, it was power. Imagine people who had so much power adjusting to a situation where they had no power at all. This is exactly what was happening in the UK. This was until the Bill of Rights in 1689, and this was a game changer. It further restricted the powers of the monarchy, making sure that the monarch couldn't suspend any laws because they would just get up and suspend any laws or levy taxes willingly without any budget, any parliamentary say so. When this happened, it ensured that the parliament became the sovereign because it meant that the king had to take permission from parliament before they made any laws. That was the beginning of the severe limiting of the influence and power of the royal family. By this time, it now meant that the king was now more of a figurehead. That's where that word first came into place, came from. That's where that word first came from. So it was bye bye absolute monarchy, hello constitutional monarchy. Guys, so this discussion, I think I've said it before in one of my previous videos, that it brings to mind the impact of joining the EU on on the royal family. So imagine where we are coming from. The royal family had carte blanche to do anything. Like they could they could unalive someone on the street with a bang bang and nothing will happen because the king has done it. But now they're being put in a position where in their personal capacity as individuals, they became accountable to the law. So this is I have a huge suspicion that part of the reason why the UK actually exited the EU was under a lot of pressure from the royal family because being part of the EU meant that the UK was subject to the European Court of Justice and all the fundamental human rights that come with being in the EU, which were far, far, far above what the UK was offering to its own citizens before they became part of the EU. And once the UK left the EU, this is where although the media has always been it has always been trash, but you can see that they totally lost control. They became so vicious as to be able to give those kind of messages that they were sort of like the messages that what's that man who said that Megan needed to be paraded through the town and excreta thrown at her. Those kind of headlines came from the UK leaving the EU. Okay, because the UK was not necessarily known for being bastions or defenders of fundamental human rights. Okay, so now what was the other thing that happened? We're still on a journey from absolute monarchy to modern democracy. All right, next thing that happened was the reform bill. The 19th century kept the momentum going with the Reform Act, which expanded now the voting rights and made parliament more representative. The monarchy's influence was melting away faster than ice in summer. Ah, yes, Jeremy Clarkson. Thank you, Sussex Love. So if you look at this picture, You see this picture that we often see of the royal family sitting on the throne there. Did you realize that that picture that you see is the king and queen in the House of Lords? That throne you see is actually sited in the House of Lords. Yeah, that's to show you how connected to the UK legislation the royal family are. I didn't even realize this fun fact myself until I was doing the research for this video. Because by the 20th century, the UK was a so called fully fledged democracy. Basically, what it meant, okay, let me go through this and then I will summarize in my own words what I think it means. So, the monarchy's role became, on paper, ceremonial. Today, the king or queen opens parliament and signs off on laws, but for all intents and purposes, can't change anything after it has been passed into law. If you ask them, based on the fact that they are coming from an absolute monarchy, a totalitarian system, basically, it's all tradition, and they would tell you that it's a bit of negotiation behind the scenes needed to keep the running of the UK going smoothly. Now, let's talk cash, okay? The Crown Estate is a massive collection of land and properties. In 1760, let me tell you the reason why the UK have no choice but to fund the royal family, okay? So now, just to make it clear, in order for people to understand, I'm just going to, I had to trawl through a lot of information to condense what I'm trying to tell you down right now. And I'm doing my best to make it as simple as possible. Basically, what happened is that the royal family owned practically the whole of the UK. And there's a lot of land which the royal family had to agree to put into the crown estate. Okay, they had to put a collection of land into the crown estate. This was because King George III, he struck a deal with Parliament. He said to them, okay, remember, this is after the civil war in the UK. They struck a deal, and the deal was that they would put these lands. uh, So, it's what I'm trying to say is that it's not all the lands that the royal family owned. They had certain lands, vast and expensive land and houses, which were all put into something called the Crown Estate. It's like a trust, which is made up of the royal family's properties, which they have now assigned to the Crown Estate. It means that they don't own the properties personally. What basically, if you distill the deal that the government and the royal family made, it is like a fee sharing agreement. In the Crown Estate, what happens is that any money that is made from any of the properties that the royal family own in that is part of the crown estate, the royal family agreed to give up 75% of the money that comes into this estate, and while they take 25%. Okay, this is it is this fund that is actually called the modern sovereign grant. Any money that is goes into the crown estate is called the sovereign grant. But the reason why they feel entitled to this money without doing anything to account for the money is that the money is coming from their own estate, which they had to give up in order for peace to reign in the UK. All right. So basically, the only reason why they do engagements is to be seen to be working, not because they need to actually do any work. So it now makes you wonder, why then are we seeing this headline in the media? King to receive extra 45 million of public money as Crown Estate income source. It is deceptive. It was meant to create outrage. It was meant to distract, because the reality of the situation is that the royal family are not getting an increased income. What has happened, remember, the funds that they get out of the sovereign grant is as a result of a percentage. So that means that if the sovereign grant makes £10 in the year 2024, what they will get is 75%. What the government will get is 75%, and the royal family will get 25%. So naturally, if the income of the sovereign grant increases to £20, it means that in actual cash, what each party will get will increase. And it is not because anything additional is being done, it's just because the income that came in increased. Where they got £10 last year, this year they're getting £20. So 75% of what he would have gotten last year, of course, is going to increase when the income doubles this year. So you got to wonder, why did they then throw this out there? They know that this kind of information causes a lot of outrage. So you have to ask yourself, what are they trying to distract attention away from? Because this is nothing new. J- Who on this is nothing new. What is new though is that William, who for the first time has now got access to the income from the Duchy of Cornwall, which every heir in waiting does have access to. It is said that he received 23.6 million from the Duchy of Cornwall. And while he does, well, they say he does pay a standard rate of tax on his income, but he enjoys the right to privacy, because this income is private income. It doesn't belong to the Duchy of Cornwall. The income that comes to him is regarded as private royal income. So he doesn't have to declare how much he is getting from the Duchy of Cornwall. So there you have it, my friends. From the Magna Carta to modern day parliament, power has shifted steadily from the monarch to elected officials. And while the royals still live large, they do tend to live within a framework that balances tradition with democratic principles. So let's call it a mixed democracy. In reality, it's not a total democracy like you have and understand it to be in the US. Okay? This is the reality. And I was literally uh last year's old, which is 50, before I realized that this is actually what the case is. And it is actually digging into the information that I need to discuss Harry and Meghan's matter that brought this information to my consciousness, to for me to realize that actually, do you know what? The UK is not as democratic as they say they are. What they call the fundamental human rights are really not the fundamental human rights. What they call the constitutional monarchy is really just the royal family delegating their duties now to elected officials who have taken over, let's say, about 75% of the duties that the monarch used to do from when we know that laws were made in 1215. So, guys, what are your thoughts on this matter? Share your thoughts in the comment section. Let me go to the comments and see what you have in here. So Lona says, I heard, okay, I've seen that before. Angela Simmons, in the US, we don't want a king in the USA. Not trying to give you a king. I'm not sure what I was saying that made you understand that I was saying so. I hope I understood what you were saying. Hello, Wizzy and family. Thank you for explaining what happened in the UK history. Yep. If you read, yeah, this is exactly right. This is exactly right. Lorna says if you read Project 2025 that Trump has aligned himself with, you might get a worse dictator. Uh, the principles of democracy are not for everyone. Where you have countries where people vote on tribal lines or religious lines, democracy doesn't work that well. Exactly. Yep. 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 Just like what they did to Libya, they tried to force democracy on Libya and it ended up dismantling the cohesiveness of the entire country. Now there are wars everywhere. No one can agree with anything. Meanwhile, they were living just fine under Gaddafi. Uh, I don't know why you're saying that. Democracy depends on feel, exchange of ideas and opinion. If it's from the opposition and the ability to see the other side and come to a compromise. But I think that you also have to understand the country to be able to impose democracy on the people. They have tried to impose democracy on Africa and see how well it has worked. And the reality of the situation is that as much as the UK advocates for democracy, I'm sure a lot of people don't even fully understand the kind of democracy that operates in the UK because I think that they play a charade. I think that it takes a lot of digging beneath the surface to fully understand the kind of democratic structure that operates in the UK. I think that if people fully understand today, there would be an uprising because I think what actually happens is that there is a fee sharing agreement in place. Fee sharing in the sense that the royal family agreed to give up a lot of their power, a lot of their lands and houses to the public because of their historical importance. But in return for that fee sharing agreement, it means that they collaborate on a lot of things. They protect each other's interests on a lot of things. And if they were ever to breach the agreement, they would literally be civil war. That is why the royal family in this UK has their own army. Nobody has actually pointed that fact out. When they're doing all those parades that they do in the UK, who are all those people? All of them are the UK regiment, you know. The royal family have their own people. So who are all those people? You know? Um So, if you think about what I am sharing with you against the backdrop of what Harry and Meghan have to deal with, you can see where, like, the culture clash came in for Meghan. She might have known and understood what the royal family was. But on the other hand, the UK in public have always said that the royal family don't have any power. They're a constitutional monarchy, only for her to come closer and realize that it's a lot more than that. And you can also see from Harry's demeanor that he's very careful, very, very careful when he's talking about the royal family. He might talk about them in like the personal sense, but he never gets like too wild with his accusations. He still keeps it in line of being vulnerable. It's hard, even though the UK have done a good job of attacking Harry, even when he's being vulnerable. But they've not been able to adequately make an accusation of treason stick. And that's because he has been very careful not to be abusive of the royal family in public. This is apart from the fact that the other, for PR, it wouldn't have done him any good to do that. So he has trod a very, very fine line in trying to separate himself from the royal family. He was always taking up the more I study about the royal family, their history, their power, their influence, the more I see how big a task Harry took on when he decided that he was going to be stepping back from the royal family. It would have been lovely if they could just support his position, but because of what he knows about the royal family, because of his cases against the media, which somehow implicates the royal family, they see him as being a traitor. Because regardless of how soft he wants to play it, they will still get some backlash as a result of their own, should I call it, shenanigans with the media. Uh, Lorna says, thank you for explaining. On a different podcast, please could you explain the British guild system? It might help to explain the British people's traditional psyche. I could definitely do that. I could definitely do that. Karen says they're too insulated and corrupt. Mm, I think when I look at it, I think I see the insulated bit because they have to maintain a relationship with each other. I think from it's been an evolution from absolute monarchy, absolute totalitarianism to a system of a system of mixed democracy, should I say? Yeah. So while the monarchy has stepped back from day-to-day running of the government, they have no say as to who comes in to do what. But when it comes to discussing certain things, the royal family do have an input. Okay, so it was necessary for me to take you guys on this journey, and I'm creating a playlist which I can direct everybody to because this is important as we discuss the steps and actions that Harry has to take. Two things that have happened in recent times to show you the extent, and I've had a lot of people saying and trying to diminish the power and influence of the royal family. I don't mind that in terms of everybody can talk mess, but when we're talking about how to fight and how to actually get Harry and Meghan out of this system, then we need to really look at what we are really dealing with here. And this is the reason why, after taking a look at everything, I came to the conclusion that the best way of dealing with this is a United Nations petition. It is a gargantuan task. It's a huge, huge, huge endeavor. But I'm determined to go ahead and do it. The people who do it don't have two heads. I had someone saying that the taking this matter to the UN doesn't make any difference. The UN can't do anything. Well, I beg to differ. The alternative is to sit back and just come online every day talking about what is happening and not really taking any steps. I beg to differ because when there is a petition against the media houses in the UK, that information will signal to the other media houses all over the world, and they will then be able to report about it, and the attention of the media harassment Harry and Meghan are facing will shine on the UK. So far nobody is doing anything because they feel like it's a local matter, and they do not want to be accused of breaching UK sovereignty. But when it becomes an international matter, then that's where it becomes different. Lorna says, well, the horses are coming home to roost in the UK. First, a King's Guard beat a tourist, and a UK gold medalist in dressage got kicked out in Paris Olympics for cruelty to her horse. I saw that story, but I didn't really read it. I will go back and read it later. But these kind of things, just as I wrap up, these kind of things, bad reputation, the UK people, like slightly a faction of the UK people grumbling, will not get the royal family out. They're too ingrained in the British system to get them out. It would literally take an action similar to the French Revolution to get the royal family out of the palaces and out of the constitution, because laws have to be passed to get them out. I don't like it either, but and I must emphasize that because I've had people saying, "Why are you promoting and pushing the royal family?" It's not that. I am just trying to assess my enemy clearly. So that we can then now look at how to deal with them. All right, so I'm going to end this video here. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you need to refer to it, please find it. You will find it in you'll find it in a playlist, and I will share the name of the playlist on my community page after this video. Thank you, everyone, for attending my TED Talk. It's so lovely to see people who are interested in things like this, because I think I'm quite nerdy when it comes to these kind of things. And when I dive deep into it, my imagination just goes wild trying to understand. It's almost like I'm transplanting myself into the era that I am reading about. All right, guys. So thank you so much for being here. I'm coming back with another video on Prince Harry's ITV interview in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So I will see you then if you're still on. All right. Take care, and let me have any comments you have in the comment section. Bye now. Bye.